This show was made possible through the support of FNX, First Nations Experience.
You're on native ground. I'm Daniel Herrera of the Miwok Nation.
And I'm Belwanji of the Assiniboine Sioux and Manda Nation.
Welcome to our original series created for FNX.
We have another great show to share with you. Today we are filming at the California State Fair.
Today's show highlights strong indigenous warriors.
Three men who have stood up in the past and still do to this day, protecting our native rights, our native culture, and this land we live on.
Let's go to Bronwyn on the campus of the University of California, Davis, where she was fortunate to meet up with Chris Peters, who has been championing the 7th Generation Fund for more than 30 years.
I'm here with Chris Peters at UC Davis. Hi Chris, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. I am the president and CEO of the 7th Generation Fund for Indigenous Peoples. We are a 36-year-old organization. We do grassroots organizing, and we fund projects throughout Native America, some in Central and South America, but pretty much in the United States. And we look for optimism in Native communities. We look for communities that are inspiring, have a commitment to the continuation of Native traditions and Native cultures.
And what inspired the 7th Generation Fund? What inspired the title, the concept?
The 7th Generation Fund started primarily in the 70s, but sort of grew out of a national movement at the time, a Native movement. So the concept around 7th Generation Fund grew from that basic concept of Six Nation peoples. Each of our deliberation, we consider the impact on 7 generations to come, working toward a goal that all of our descendants will have clean air and clean water, enough food to eat, and have strong and vibrant communities, healthy communities that continue traditions and ceremonies, much like our ancestors of the past.
Next, I want to get into your activist projects with human rights movement. How does that affect Native American communities?
Native peoples historically have always been in the forefront of human rights issues. Ever since the colonization of the Americas began some 500 years ago, we were always in a resistance mode. In fact, Native peoples have fought a continuing battle. We have to take necessary stands to defend our communities, to defend our homelands, to protect our families, and our basic rights for sustenance here in the Americas. And that battle has been ongoing and will continue to be ongoing. The newcomers, the Euro-Americas, have continuously attacked our communities. Recently, I think that movement has intensified because, the available resources, strategic resources in America and perhaps the world, if we look at indigenous peoples throughout the world, happen to be on or near indigenous lands. And the recent efforts to exploit those resources has intensified and will continue to intensify because resources throughout the world have been used up. Indigenous peoples throughout America are still relatively rich with resources. And I think that's the battle we look for, fighting continuously in the future. Gold mining, uranium mining, coal mining are certainly at the forefront of each of our battles now. But I think as we turn and look at a future that will be impacted with significant climate change, water becomes a critical resource. And indigenous peoples in the Americas, we have sort of a retained rights to water. We need to assert that right because water is going to be the next war. It's already the next war, and it will intensify. Any tribal communities that have running rivers and streams, those are certainly going to be targeted. Water is the basis of life. And as those are drained, our communities are going to be impacted. You know, the consumption level is at an extent where it is unsustainable. If we are concerned about generations to come, there has to be some consideration of how we live and how we consume today. We are consuming energy at a rate where our grandkids and great-grandkids will have no heat in their homes. And that's significant. They will have no food to put on their tables. We are eating the food of our grandkids. That should be a call to people to say, hey, we have to stop. We have to slow down a little bit and provide for that longer-term vision of how the earth will survive. There are still significant numbers of traditional people that still hold hard to those concepts and those belief systems. I think they offer a solution and a direction for not only indigenous peoples, but perhaps all peoples of the world, that we need to be looking at a more earth-conscious way of understanding an ecological mindset. You know, the newcomers, the non-native people, have been exploiting the world at a rate where it is unsustainable. Native peoples now are beginning to get involved in that exploitation too. And we're at a good time where we can step back and say, hey, is this the direction we want to go? Or is there a different direction that we need, as human beings, need to take? And I think that fork in the road is an important time to consider who we are and where we want to go. And Native people need to be outspoken. They need to be invited to the table to talk about these issues more. And they need to be demanding positions at the table to address these issues.
The Seventh Generation Fund is looking into the future. What do you guys look for through your lens?
The future has to be developed by the people, by Native peoples. And we've done a few futuring conversations with grassroots communities. And generally what we find is that they're looking for a return to a time when life was more simple. Life was a little easier, where there were communities and families that were together, stronger, where community gardens were not an anomaly, but were a major factor in all of the communities, where there was orchards. Food sovereignty was not an issue because we grew and we produced food and we lived happy lives again. There were ceremonies again. There was more involvement around who we were as Native or indigenous peoples. But perhaps every tribal nation needs to take the time to sit down and say, let's look at our future. Let's spend some time for the next 2 weeks and just think about how we want to, as people, how we want to develop, how we want to grow, in which directions, what are the goals that we want to achieve, and begin to construct plans and strategies to get there.
Well, thank you for speaking with us today. I'm Bronwyn, and you're on Native Ground.
Michael Horse has been a bad guy as well as a good guy.
Acting, of course. As an actor, Michael gets the chance to portray lots of different characters in shows, such as Malcolm in the Middle, Superman,
The Wild Thornberrys, and Walker, Texas Ranger.
Roswell, and North of 60.
Passenger 57, as well as Deputy Hawk in Twin Peaks.
He even played Tonto in The Legend of the Lone Ranger, made in 1981.
Now we take you to the Stanford Powwow, where we had a chance to catch up with Michael Horse at his booth near the dance arena.
Standing here in the refreshing canopy of Michael Horse, and we are taking a look at his artwork. It's very original, authentic, and you can only get it here. Is this your first year at Stanford?
Oh, no, I've been doing Stanford for many, many, many years, since the 80s, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, a long time, yeah. I come to dance, I gourd dance. And
Can you tell us the history and teachings behind gourd dancing in the powwow circuit?
It's a veterans dance, you know. It's people that, there's gourd societies, and they come and they're protectors of the people. It's a Kiowa tradition. It's a very long-honored.
Have you danced in other categories?
Yeah, I used to be a traditional dancer a long time ago, but I don't dance too much.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I don't move like I used to. I keep thinking I'm going to dance again, but...
Can you tell us a little bit about your art and what inspires you?
I'm basically a silversmith and a sculptor. I am alumni of the Indian Art Institute in Santa Fe, and Alan Hauser was my teacher for sculpture. But I used to work for some of the museums. I worked for the Hay Foundation in New York, the Museum of the American Indian. And don't leave me in a museum because I'm going to go through everything you got. And I look in their archives and I see this tribal art called ledger art. You know, it was all put away in their archives, and I was fascinated by it. You know, I went, this is our history from our point of view. So I used to do just a couple for myself, you know, because I couldn't afford any of the old ones. And then there were a few customers, and now I've been doing this for over 35 years. You know, we used to paint on hide. That was our history book, our calendar. We could roll it up, take it with us. There would be little pictures of certain things that would happen, important things like a migration of the people, things, meteor showers in the heavens, and season, you know, battles, you know. Then we're put on the reservation, you know, a lot of the buffalo, they're gone. We're allowed to hunt like we used to, and we started to get hold of scrap paper. It's called ledger art because most of it was done on the pages of ledger books that took records of goods and commodities that were brought to the forts, settlements, and to the reservation itself. But any piece of scrap paper, it started about 1860, but most of it was done late 1800s, early 1900s. You know, and I kind of recreate that. Like, this is a map of the Dakotas before it was split up into two states. These are actual Carlisle Indian School papers, 1910 when Jim Thorpe played. And these are very famous Native American baseball players. This is a baseball card of Chief Bender, which was a real famous pitcher that played for New York. You know, he actually invented the slider, you know. So this is our history book, you know, and it's interesting doing this for so many years. I've learned a lot about history in general. Like, I was painting on something from the same time as the Battle of Little Bighorn, and I realized that when that happened in the East, the Civil War had been over for 4 years. The Brooklyn Bridge was built. The first baseball game between Kansas City and Missouri, when the Sioux and Cheyenne made their last stand. People don't put that culture shock together. I'm Yaqui and Mescalero and Partzuni, so this is, you know, this is a Plains art form. But I grew up, you know, I was a traditional dancer, and I grew up with a lot of Lakota and Cheyenne and Kiowa guys, so I know the culture pretty well, you know. So I'm fascinated by it.
Could you tell us a little bit about your silversmithing?
Yeah, you know, I've been doing it ever since my uncles were silversmiths. So I've been doing it ever since I was like about 15 years old. The Katsina pieces, this is kind of, you know, anybody sees this knows that this is my work, you know. This is all completely hand done. And even the tools that make the marks are my tools. They're either family tools or tools that I made, you know. So even if somebody wants to duplicate my work, they'd have to duplicate all my tools. You know, and this it's a lot of work in this. Something like this takes me a couple days to make, you know. I love working in silver. It's one of my favorite things to do. I've done a lot of other things in my career. I was into movies, and people ask me what's my favorite thing to do. It's to make jewelry.
Can you tell us a little bit about your public institutionalized education, what that experience was like?
Oh, you know, it's really interesting. You know, now, you know, both my wife and I are activists, you know, especially when we see the talking heads on TV and talking about the history of the United States. We knew from a very beginning, from the time I was a little kid, I knew that it wasn't true. And I said, if it wasn't true what they're putting in our school books, then it's not true what they're telling us now, you know. When I moved to Southern California, it was interesting. I knew nothing about the native people of California, so I was learning about the Chumash people, you know, and how they were master sailors and sailed all over the world. They're finding Chumash style canoes in Peru. So my kid brings home her school book, says Balboa discovered the Pacific Ocean. So I go to her teacher, she's in grade school, and I said, what, these people never noticed the ocean? They never, oh, I didn't see that, thank you, you know. I said, that's just wrong, you know, and the whole histories of the missions and things that I was taught. But I had a real hard time with the school system here, you know. It's starting to change, and they're fighting it now. They're trying, in Arizona, where I'm from, they're trying to take all the native study books, you know, out of the school system. Those were given to us in our history books, you know, about occupying and about conquering and all that stuff, you know, and as being an indigenous person, I had to stop, and even a younger person, I go, what does that mean? What did you do to us? You know, and even young native kids today, when you point out, you say, look, this was all ours. It was all ours. And they say, well, how did that happen? Why isn't it not ours still, you know? So there's a reevaluation, I think, especially among younger native kids, of what that really means, to be conquered or to be occupied.
And your social advocacy efforts?
Well, both my wife, especially my wife, were really involved in stopping the Keystone Pipeline. You know, I worked up in Canada. I worked on a really famous native TV series called North of 60 up in northern Alberta, and the most beautiful place I had ever seen. And I said to my wife, "We got to go up there." And my friends say, "You don't want to see it now. It'll hurt you. It'll really tear you up inside what they're doing." And that whole awakening, not just being a native person, but just being a human being. You got to get on the right path, or you're going to be in big trouble. I'm old. I'll live through it all, but I got a grandson. And it doesn't matter if you're a native person or who you're from. We all have to relate to this earth in the same way, or we're going to be in big trouble.
You're also working in film.
Yeah, I've been in film a long, long time. I kind of started as a semi-stuntman. I was a really bad rodeo rider, and the first time somebody paid me to fall off my horse, I went, I fall off, I get paid, I can do that, I've actually done some things that I'm proud of. I did Twin Peaks, which was, it changed the way that people process television. And I did this show in Canada, North of 60, primetime indigenous drama. It was on for 7 years. I did 2.5 years of it, and nobody was a medicine man. It was just about people and their families, and even people I knew that say we're not really interested in native culture. We were interested in these people, in these human beings. Digital film has changed things. Now it's back in the hands of native filmmakers. You young people, I'm seeing you take these cameras out and documenting your problems on the reservation, your problems with substance abuse, and talking to your elders before they pass, and getting your ceremonies down and archived. So I'm really excited about where that's going.
In 1968, Dennis Banks co-founded the American Indian Movement, known to most as AIM.
Trying to protect the civil rights of Native Americans living in urban areas, they brought attention to the discrimination and treaty rights that were being broken during this era.
Their related goals became to protect the traditional ways of Indian people and to engage in legal cases protecting rights of natives, such as hunting and fishing, trapping and farming.
Dennis participated in the 1969-1971 occupation of Alcatraz Island, initiated by Indian students from San Francisco of the Red Power movement.
Their intention was to highlight Native American issues and promote Indian sovereignty on their own lands.
Now let's go to the American Indian Film Festival, where Dennis talked about his childhood and his activist days.
Mr. Banks.
37th year of this festival here. And I remember the very first one that I came to. It was right here. One of my young daughters started walking on this very floor. So I have some good memories of the beginning of this festival.
So what did you perform on stage?
We sang 3 songs. One of them, of course, was the American Indian Movement song, the AIM song. This is a song that started singing after the death of Raymond Yellow Thunder out in Gordon, Nebraska. This was 1972. And as we were lowering the body back into the ground, a young Cheyenne man started to sing this song. People were shoveling dirt, and that song, we sang it. We got into the truck at the back of the pickup, still singing, and then sang it all the way back to Gordon, Nebraska. We got out of the pickup, still holding onto the drum, singing, and into the armory, rather, where about 2,000 Native people were waiting for us to decide what was going to happen. But that song became the AIM song. The other song was a tribute to a lot of friends over the years who I've known and who are ending their life cycle and coming close to going to the spirit world. One of them is Lee Brightman, who was my trusted friend for many years. He's still alive. He had a stroke recently and he's slowing down. So, but to all the warriors who fell in the line of duty, in the duty of being Native and fighting for the interests of Native people, fighting for our land, fighting for clean air, fighting to have clean soil, the water. It's the rights that we have, hunting rights, fishing, even trapping and harvesting wild rice. The destruction that has happened against our land that affects our medicinal herbs and the roots, the very medicines that we have been taking and that we use to become well.
What are some words of wisdom that you could give to youth today?
It's kind of tricky, but it has a message, and that is when you work for change, for the betterment, when you confront big business, when you confront schools that refuse to end their racist teachings, when you confront big governments that refuse to change their policies on our land. See, our land is being governed by the Bureau of Land Management in Washington, D.C. You know, we have title to it, but they manage our land, and it shouldn't be that way. But to the young person who sees the need and wants to answer the call, you might get bruises, you might go to court, you might end up in jail, you might go to prison. To me, all those worries aren't sufficient to not do anything. It is our duty, mandatory duty, that if injustices are happening, that we have to stand up. And if we get killed during the process, then let them say that we died standing up, that we died in the struggle, that we never buckled, that we never dropped to our knees, that we did this struggle with honor and pride. And that's the marching orders that I leave to young people. And when you've lived as long as I have, when it's time to go, it's a good day to die.
What's the most significant point of your life that changed your ideas?
I was forced to go to 3 boarding schools, and the first one was when I was 4 years old. They took me, and I stayed there for 6 years without seeing my mother, my father, my grandparents. I finally got to come home for 30 days, and I asked my mother, "Why didn't you write to me?" And she said, "I did then, I did." But I never questioned her beyond that. And I went to another boarding school for another 3 years, and then they let me come home for 30 more days. And again I asked my mother, "Why didn't you write, Mom?" And she says, "Then I did write." I ran away from all these schools. Every one of them I ran away from them. And finally, the last time I ran away, I made it home, came home, and but my love for my mother we'd become separated too long for me to love my mother as my mother. And that hurt me inside. And she passed away, and I went to the funeral, but no tears could come to my eyes because I had thought that she abandoned me. And then 50 years later, my daughter went to this National Archives in Kansas City, where they store all the papers of government programs. Tashina called me and she says, "Dad, we found your school records, and we're bringing them home." And I said, "Oh, good." And she showed them to me, and I was looking through them, and I was wondering about all the people that I went to school with. And then she shocked me by saying, "Dad, we also found the shoebox, and in there were letters from my mother. I couldn't do anything." And I started to read the letter. And the second one I opened up, and it says, "Dear Superintendent, enclosed is $5 to send my son home." She even sent money to this government. And the government never told me about these letters. They never once told me that my mother asked about me and sent me money, sent money to send me home. And I will never forgive this government for what it did, not only to me, what it did to thousands of other young children across the country. Thousands of students went through the same thing that I did. That's what changed my mind about what I had to do with my life. It set in motion a path that I must choose and that I must follow.
Thank you for joining us.
I'm Bella Laundrie of the Assiniboine Sioux and Mandan Nation.
And I'm Daniel Herrera of the Miwok Nation. See you next time
On Native Ground.
Hello, my name is Nawakamig, also known as Dennis Banks. Always going to be native ground. Always was, always will be.
Hello, I'm Michael Horse, and I'm on native ground. How cool is this?
I'm Chris Peters, and I'm on native ground.
My name's Adam Scott. I'm on native ground.
Yes!
I'm Anita Hill, and I'm on native ground.
I'm Don Henley of the Eagles, and it's nice to be here on native ground.
I'm Saginaw Grant, and I'm on native ground.
Hi, I'm Chris Eyre, and I'm on native ground.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Amy Pollard, and you're on native ground.
Hi, I'm Jessica Alba, and I'm on native ground.